There is a loan program available to veterans that is arguably one of the best mortgage products on the market. No down payment, competitive rates, and for the right borrower, the financial advantages are hard to beat. Yet a lot of veterans either don't fully understand what they have access to, or they run into resistance in the market when they try to use it. Today, we're sitting down with Mike Grimm, who is a veteran who just closed on his home using VA financing through John Trauma. Today, we're going to talk about what the VA loan actually is, what it did for Mike, and why the stigma around it in the marketplace is costing some veterans some incredible opportunities. So, let me introduce everyone here. Mike, welcome to the show. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And John Trauma. John is a mortgage loan veteran. He's been here in New York for over 2 decades. And John handled Mike's financing and is going to break down what the VA loan actually means for a buyer. So let's get into it. Mike, we'll start with you. Just briefly tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background and really, where you were in this process when you first started.
Perfect. So, like many others out of high school, I didn't know what path I wanted to choose. So I went with the military. The military played great dividends for me, in which I left military. They sent me up to college, and I went through college and eventually ended up in a finance banking field. Coming out of that, me and my wife decided it was time to start looking. We started looking at the rates. We started looking at mortgage products ourselves, but we just kind of realized that we didn't know as much as we thought we initially knew. It was time to go to a lender and ask for more information. It was time to see what products really are out there that are applicable to us, is which we finally came across a VA loan, which at the time we thought had this stigma around it. It had this, you know, oh, you can't do a VA loan. You have to do a conventional loan. Everything has to be a conventional loan. And that's kind of where John stepped in as a lender and was like, no, that's not the case. Here is this program that the VA offers, and I think you'd be really interested in it. And that is when we started the process of looking for the house, working with John and working with our agent. That's kind of it on how we got into the house process.
So essentially, you really didn't know if you were going to go the VA loan route or not before you spoke with John.
Exactly. We weren't sure of what all the options were, in which John was amazing to kind of lay out all the options we had, the pros, the cons, and what would work best for us. And on paper, if you look at the VA loan compared to a conventional loan, the things involved are way less than we thought they were going to be, and the benefits to going with that loan are way more than we thought they were going to be.
Yeah, it always seems to work out that way. The expectations aren't always met. Did you use your VA benefit before, or was this the first time?
So this was the first time using the VA benefit.
Okay, all right. So do you remember your search? Can you kind of walk us through a little bit of what that looked like? How long were you looking before you found the right home?
Yeah. So when it came to the search, we went in knowing that it wasn't going to be find the first house, fall in love, but we weren't aware of how actually crazy the market is. You hear like, oh, things are crazy out there. You'll see. We thought it was going to be a month, and it started working to 3, 4. And I think we ended up around that 4 to 6 month range before we started really finding houses we were falling in love with. And then about at the 5 month range, we really found that one house where we're like, we have to go all in on this. This is the one that we want.
hmm So was it? It's interesting. Was it some of the difficulties that you faced along the way, not financing, so to speak, but it was more about the competition? Is that pretty accurate?
I would say that was pretty ag. You go into houses where it's kind of already sold, and you're coming in after, and if you're not coming cash in hand with 20, 10, 15, 20% over, it's you don't even get an email. It's just nope.
Yeah.
And then you see it pop up on Zillow that it's pending.
That's probably a big psychological dig as well. Like getting outbid and being frustrated for any buyer, I would imagine is mentally difficult. So how did you stay in it? Mentally, how did you keep your spirits up, being positive about it?
I think the hardest part is kind of like you said. It's like going for a job and not getting the job. It's like you walk into these houses and you fall in love with them, and then it's a bummer. It's like you're let down, you're upset, and then in the time waiting, you kind of set up your life as this was going to be your forever home. And then you lose by 70, 80, $90,000 on some houses. And it, it's disheartening. It makes you and the ones you love that you're looking for the house with, you fight a little bit because you're like, do we downsize now or do we go up in our range? And you don't really know what you want anymore because it's like, do you just want the asset or do you want your forever home?
Right.
And that's the psychological part is like, do I just want a house? Do I just want a house I'm going to sink $150,000 into? Or do I want a house that every time I walk in, I say, this is mine. Like this is amazing. And those were, they're bickering. I wouldn't call them fights, but they're arguments that you have with your family, you have with your significant other, because everyone is, oh, you're looking at houses. My friend Sally's sending one. And you're like, oh, we got outbid. And then your mother-in-law yells at Sally, and then Sally yells at the homeowner. And then it's just tense all around while you're looking.
It's interesting you say that because it's not for the faint at heart when you're in competitive markets as you were in. And being a former military serviceman, was there ever a point when you considered changing your approach just to be more competitive or anything along those lines?
I did, and that was the point in which I had conversations with John, and John was saying like, "Hey, like let's look at the other options that are there. Let's see what houses are getting approved. Let's see what offers are getting approved. Let's look at the areas that you're looking in. What are things looking like?" And my agent came in and we looked at comps and we ran numbers. And I think the biggest part about it too is there's a luck. There's a luck factor in all of this as well that people don't talk about. The real a lot of real estate agents out there, they want this in a sense and they don't want it in a sense. They want to sell the houses, but they don't want to ruin a market or tarnish a market. But it's the word of mouth that goes around that makes it even tougher is when your friend fight and you have to keep that mindset of you're gonna get it, you just need to work through it, you need to mentally prepare yourself, and it does all work out in the end. But now it's like a wedding. You plan, and now we've been in the house a month and I feel like we didn't even go through that whole process. It just flew by.
Well, you become an expert at this process too while you go through it. I'm assuming that because you're very knowledgeable as it were with this particular product. John, let me ask you because it's interesting to me for anyone that is watching this who has served or maybe is currently serving and isn't fully clear on what the VA loan actually is. Can you break it down? What does the program do for a buyer?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably the one thing the government has gotten right, in terms of supporting their veterans. I guess in a nutshell, 100% financing opportunity with no mortgage insurance at below market interest rates is essentially what you're getting with the VA loan, and that's unmatched. It's really by far one of the best programs. But it's not always well received. Not every veteran is going to have a sizable down payment. Michael was fortunate that he had a sizable down payment to work with. Not everybody does, and that's where I think the program becomes a concern for some. Do I believe it should? No, I don't. But it's just, again, I think people who have been in the industry a long time. Especially government issued loans like FHA, are similar to the VA in that, again, property condition is very important. One of the things that we actually did with Michael was we did discuss the possibility of going with a conventional loan. I think there was a property specifically that you were interested in that they wouldn't entertain a VA loan. So could we go with a conventional loan for Michael? And we could, but is it what was best for him? No, it wasn't. And luckily we were able to find a house that matched the financing needs that he wanted to go with, and it all worked out in the end. But yeah, I'll tell you, this is it definitely, this buying a home in this process and this time, this market, you really do need to have thick skin for sure.
Yeah, sounds that way. It certainly sounds that way. And there are a lot of benefits to government programs. And I think just from a cost perspective, I mean, how would you describe the difference if you had to just summarize it between a conventional loan and a VA loan or even an FHA loan in terms of costs?
The cost factors are pretty much the same. There's really not much of a disparity between them. You do have a VA funding fee, depending on your loan to value, depending if you've used it before or not. So there is a premium that's built into the loan, but it's marginal in my opinion, based on what you're getting in terms of the lower interest rates and not having to pay the mortgage insurance. Even FHA, they have a mortgage insurance premium plan as part of their loan. They do charge insurance, so it's a little bit more costly in that regard. But yeah, again, VA loans by far, are one of the best financing vehicles that we have in our industry.
Now, if I'm correct, I think that Mike was pretty well qualified financially. I think he made a little bit too much to qualify for grants or assistance.
Right.
So in his particular case, the VA loan, what did specifically what did that do for him? Given the fact that he wasn't able to get those other assistance.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, Jack, was just the below market interest rate. So I think you did pretty good in that respect, and then the fact that again, there's no mortgage insurance. The combination of those two things will save him tremendous amount of money and resources over the course of having that mortgage.
It's funny. I was talking to somebody not too long ago who had an assumption that because it's a government issued loan, that it must be harder to get, or it comes with a lot of hurdles. Talk about whether that's a myth, whether it's partly true, the hurdles that they were referring to. What can you talk about?
Assumable mortgages. That's a great point. Those are available for government issued loans only. So FHA loans are assumable, VA loans are assumable, and what that ultimately means is that the seller who holds that financing can essentially transfer the rate that they have if it makes sense. If we're in a higher rate market environment, then for sure that would make sense. If you're in a lower interest rate environment, then you wouldn't want to assume it. So it really is going to be specific to the timing of everything. But yeah, it can really be beneficial to a buyer coming in if in fact the rates are higher.
So, Mike, there's a perception in the marketplace that a VA loan could be riskier for a seller to accept. Did you encounter that at all during your search?
So I did. In some places, I would look at houses where they would say right off the bat, kind of, what's your funding? Do you have cash? Do you have a conventional? Do you have an FHA? Oh, we really don't want to work with any VA or FHA loans. And it kind of comes back to, I think, a long, long time ago, there was some kind of fee or some kind of extra due diligence that was associated with these loans that has since been removed. And it is not a thing anymore, but it's just been passed down. And to be completely honest, from a fund financing level, most financial institutions would love a loan that they can get that's backed with a 25% guarantee on the loan. And I think that's a huge thing that I know the banks understand, but it takes a real estate agent who works with veterans or works with police or anybody who wants to do that specific kind of clientele to understand. And then your agent has to fight against that stigma. Cash is king. Everybody knows that. But also, I think being a good person and doing some due diligence on your end can help a lot, especially because usually historically, if your neighborhood is full of veterans, they usually are good people to have in your neighborhood. They've served your country. They have good protection skills. They can look over the neighborhood. They can look over the people around them. They have good jobs. They've done many great things. And all my best friends are veterans, and all of them have houses. All of them use the VA loan. And it's just something that even when I talk to other friends now who are veterans who just got out, they're like, oh yeah, my agent said that we should just go conventional. It's going to be better. But to what John said before, you add in PMI, you add in the quarter to half intra% increases, that funding fee, if even applicable to you, could be a very, very, very large number, well more than what this between 1 and 3% fee you might have to pay for the funding fee, depending on what your down payment is. So it's definitely out there. It hurts. a lot of loan contracts will actually say it in the standard language. The standard language loan contracts will say like get funding other than VA, other than the FHA. If you go online and look at templates, that's how common it is. When we wrote our contract, luckily their lawyer, our lawyer, they were all on board. We all understood, but we did edit our contract to say that we were going with a VA loan. And that's just kind of how it is, that it's even in templates. Like if you go on Google and type in a mortgage template contract, it's gonna say like loan funding besides VA, besides FHA. And that hurts a lot of veterans.
John, talk about this. Why is it such a stigma? Where does it come from?
Well, like I said, I think a lot of it has to do, and Mike pointed it out too, but, things were different back in the day. Even like doing loans like Sony May, where we use this, the processes are different today. Things are easier, but people still hold on to what they remember, what it used to be. It's not what it is necessarily today. And it's sad because, when I think we had another, conversation recently, and, everyone's talking about the seller, the seller, the seller. And it's not really the seller, it's the listing agent and what they're communicating to the seller. That's really the piece of it here, because I pretty much can assure you, if a seller knew that they had an opportunity to sell their house to a veteran, why would you not want to do that and honor somebody that's fought for our freedom in this country? It makes no sense. But because people don't know, they passing along bad information and saying, you don't want this. And that's not always the right answer, but that's what happens. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people in our industry that are not really educated well enough in these types of programs and are advising incorrectly.
So what would you say to the listing agent, or the seller who sees a VA offer come in and hesitates? What would your
Yeah,
message?
just that. I mean, it's not what it used to be, and there's really, yeah. I mean, the only concern that you would ever run into is property condition, really. If there are some issues with a home, yeah, that could potentially, be brought to, to light and needing to be addressed. So that would be one concern. The other concern possibly would be on, I guess, on value, because there is what they call a VA amendatory clause that does give the veteran an ability based on value to get out if they so choose. And I think that's where maybe some of the fear lies. But again, somebody like Mike, where he had a decent sizable down payment, that really wasn't a concern in this particular instance. So I think it's going to vary from applicant to applicant. But again, yeah, Jack, it's very frustrating, not only for the buyers that are going through it, but for the lenders that are offering these types of financing programs.
Yeah. Well, it worked out for you, Mike, and that's the most important thing. When you found yourself under contract, what did that process feel like for you? Was there anything that surprised you about how it all went?
I want to say yes, in a good sense. So once we went under contract, I, me, John, and my wife and John's team worked so hard prior to even getting there that process was so quick. It was smooth. The sellers of this house and us we hit it off when we met. Usually you don't meet, but we met in passing, and just we understood what was wrong, what was not wrong. The VA process, which too, a lot of veterans are like, oh my God, I have to go to the VA. I'm going to wait 3 weeks to get my COE. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But I mean, in this sense, John's team, even before, they already had the COE ready. They had everything ready. They were able to request it on my behalf, get everything that I needed. And even if they couldn't, for whatever reason it may be, all you have to do is go on the VA website, you log in through your VA benefit portal, and you hit generate letter. And it pops you up a generated letter with all the information you need, all the entitlements, the disabilities, all the codes, everything. And worst case, if you are some kind of odd situation, it goes to a loan specialist who will email you pretty fairly quickly and either send you a letter or send you what you need to get a letter. That only comes up in cases with like people who are in the National Guard or people who are maybe in the reserve. But I mean, the process, once we went in contract, it was like rush and then wait because we already did everything in the front and it was so smooth. Contract signed in a week, the earnest money went over, and then that's when, John's team just kind of steps in and the lawyers step up and everybody does what they have to do. The appraisal is everybody's biggest fear, especially with the VA. They're like, oh my God, the VA appraiser, everybody hide. And they did their job. They did what they were supposed to do. The VA appraiser came in, and everything that came up was good. It appraised the way it should have based on the market, and it was smooth. And I think that's the hard part. Is I have a friend right now who's just went into contract after looking for almost a year, and their lender wasn't as the way John was. Like now their lender's asking for all these things. Like they had the pre-approval and they sent it through, and now they're like, send this, send that, send this. But John was very good after seeing us get heartbroken so many times of saying, like, listen, I'm going to put you in a situation where if you have to go VA, you go VA. If you have to go conventional, you go conventional. If you have to do whatever loan you can, we are going to get you a house at, a good rate at what you need to do. And I think that's where it ran so smoothly.
For any veteran that's watching this broadcast who hasn't used their VA benefit yet, or maybe didn't know what they had access to, what would you want them to know given the fact that you've gone through this process already?
Yeah, use it. Just do it. Just go on the website, go on the VA website and look up what benefits you're entitled to. Look up your information and get your letter, get your COE, get everything set up, and then start looking at lenders. Do not make the mistake, and I will repeat this for anybody looking this. A lot of people will put on their website that they are the VA expert, that they work with the VA, that they do this, they do that. That is not always the case. That is not true. Make sure that you vet your lender. Make sure that when you talk to your lender, that your lender is legitimate. Everyone is going to sell you the best rate. It does not mean that they're a legitimate vendor. So always do your due diligence. Use your outsourced parties. I hate to say it this way, Reddit. Reddit has great forums of people who are veterans that are using the VA loan and the banks they're using and the lenders they are using. Use lenders that you feel confident with. And I will kind of leave off when you go to a lender, use a lender that will work with you. Just because somebody has like maybe a 1/10 of a percentage point better on the rate does not mean that it's going to be smooth. I would probably pay 1/2 point more just to get the treatment that John gave, because when push came to shove and it came down to the final moment, they were there. The lenders were there. His team was there. I had other lenders that I judged on where it took them 2 weeks to answer an email from me. And when you're at the closing table, you can't wait 2 weeks. You need an answer then. So my final remarks would be go out, reach out to the VA, see if you're eligible for the COE, run the calculations, meet with a lender. If you can't run the calculations yourself, meet with somebody like John who will run them for you. A VA might not always be the best case of a loan for you. Maybe an FHA works better, or maybe a down payment assistance would work better, but weigh the options. The COE is super easy to get. The VA was very helpful. And that's all the remarks I would have to give.
That's excellent. That's excellent. John, did you want to add something to that?
As far as choosing the right VA lender, to Mike's point, I mean, we happen to actually be a top 10 lender in the nation for veterans. So yeah, we are somebody that does this regularly. All great points. I do want to make one last, remark regarding preparation, because one of the things that solidified the experience for Mike was getting a pre-commitment. And a pre-commitment is a fully vetted approval prior to you identifying a home. So when you do have that commitment in place, it's giving the seller the reassurance that they are working with a credible buyer. It's giving the seller an opportunity to work with somebody that can close in a timely manner. So when you do identify a home and you do go into contract, the majority of the heavy lifting has already been done. So it's just really a matter of getting into contract, ordering title, homeowners insurance, and let's get your keys. So if you prepare properly, the experience can be great. And as Mike said too about the going on to the VA portal, if for those technologically challenged individuals, we can, as a lender, we can go reach out and get that certificate of eligibility on your behalf. So that's not a problem unless we run into some complications. Then we will work together to get through it. But that's pretty much it.
Very good, guys. We're out of time, so I want to thank Mike for sharing your story. You've earned your benefit, and you use it the right way. I think a lot of veterans watching this are going to take a closer look at what they have access to. And John, thank you for breaking it down and for kind of clearing up the stigma. There's probably more to talk about, but I think that today's discussion is going to be valuable and helpful to people that are trying to figure out what the next move is. So, and if you are a veteran and you want to understand what your VA benefits look like for your situation, just connect with John directly at va.advancedhomeloan.com. We'll share the link in the show notes so that it's easy to connect with him. And for the listeners of the show who, of course, are veterans, I hope this interview was helpful to you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.